It started with a sound. The kind that makes your stomach drop, a gas engine roaring to life, the whir of metal blades slicing air, and the scent of freshly mangled grass rolling through the window. Every Saturday at precisely 9:03 a.m., the same sound echoed down Brookvale Drive, the HOA's landscaping crew mowing lawns like synchronized soldiers. And every week, without fail, they rolled their mowers right across my property line. I'm Evan Mitchell, 38, a quiet systems analyst who moved into Brookvale Estates for peace and order. At least, that's what the HOA brochure promised. A community built on respect and harmony. What they meant was control and complaints. The first time they cut across my lawn, I thought it was a mistake. The second time, I assumed coincidence. The third time, Karen Lutz, president of the HOA and self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood standards, made it clear it wasn't. "It's for uniformity, Evan," she said, sunglasses perched like a crown, arms folded in front of her pastel cardigan. "We want the lawns to blend, it creates curb appeal." "I paid for this property line," I replied. "You don't get to blend my land." She smiled, one of those tight, fake smiles that barely disguise irritation. "Oh, sweetie, this is how we've always done things here." That was Karen's favorite phrase. This is how we've always done things. It was the HOA's war cry, their excuse for everything from mailbox height to the color of your porch light. Over the next few weeks, my irritation turned into obsession. I'd wake up early just to watch the crew cut across my grass, leaving tire marks that mock me. They weren't even subtle about it anymore, one guy waved. The final straw came when I installed small garden lights along the edge of my yard. The next day, I found them ripped out, lying broken beside the sidewalk. When I confronted Karen, she acted like I'd accused her of arson. "Those were encroaching into the community mowing path," she said primly. "I had them removed for safety." I stared at her. "You had them removed?" She gave that same fake smile. "You'll thank me later." That night, sitting on my porch under the dim glow of my one surviving light, I realized something fundamental about people like Karen: they don't respond to reason. They respond to spectacle. And so, I began planning my show. By Tuesday, I'd ordered materials online: heavy-duty posts, tempered glass panels, and motion sensors. My neighbors watched curiously as I started building something that looked suspiciously architectural. Putting in a fence, my next-door neighbor, Tom Jennings, asked, "Beer in hand?" "Something like that," I said, drilling into the ground. A little project. By Friday, I was done. At first glance, it looked like a simple modern art installation: waist-high glass panels forming a square boundary around my front lawn. Clean, stylish, HOA-friendly. But hidden beneath the glass edges, buried in the soil, were motion sensors wired to a silent alarm and an automated sprinkler system. When someone crossed my lawn without my permission, it didn't just water the grass, it attacked. I tested it that evening, watching from my porch as a neighborhood cat tiptoed onto the lawn. A soft beep. Then psssshhhh. A sudden jet of high-pressure water shot from the ground, scattering the cat like it had seen a ghost. Perfect. Saturday arrived, HOA mowing day. I waited, coffee in hand, watching from my living room window. The crew rolled down the street, engines buzzing. Then came the moment. The mower guy, same one who waved last week, rolled right up to the edge of my lawn. He took one last glance, shrugged, and drove forward. Beep. psssshhhhh. The sprinkler system erupted like a geyser. The man yelped, leapt backward, and the mower sputtered out, soaked to the engine. Another worker laughed before being blasted himself. Within seconds, both men were floundering in a watery ambush. I could barely hold in my laughter. From across the street, Karen stormed out of her house like a general under siege. "Evan, what on earth have you done?" "Protecting my property," I said innocently. "This is vandalism." "On my own land?" Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. The soaked landscapers dragged their equipment away, muttering. "You'll hear from the HOA board," she snapped, turning on her heel. "Oh, I'm counting on it," I said. I knew I'd started something I couldn't easily stop, but after months of being pushed, it felt good. damn good. That night, under the hum of crickets, I sat on the porch again. The glass boundary gleamed faintly under the moonlight, sleek, beautiful, untouchable. Somewhere across the street, I saw Karen's curtains twitch. She was watching me. That made me smile. Because the real surprise? The sprinklers were only phase 1. The HOA didn't just strike back, they went nuclear. By Monday morning, I had 3 official violation notices taped to my door. Each one more dramatic than the last. Notice number 1, unauthorized structure erected without HOA approval. Notice number 2, installation of non-compliant irrigation system. Notice number 3, conduct unbecoming of a Brookvale resident. That last one made me laugh out loud. Conduct unbecoming? What was this, the military? But it didn't end there. The next day, the HOA newsletter arrived, titled Community Update, Upholding Neighborhood Standards. Right below a photo of our street, there it was, a paragraph clearly about me. Certain residents have taken it upon themselves to install unapproved, defensive landscaping. Let this serve as a reminder that uniformity preserves property values and community harmony. I could practically hear Karen's smug voice in every word. That evening, I walked down my driveway to grab the mail when I saw her. Standing across the street, arms crossed, talking to a couple of neighbors, Jim and Marlene Cook, the kind who wore matching jogging outfits and smiled like they'd been Botoxed into submission. Karen was gesturing toward my lawn, her tone all syrup and venom. I caught her eye. She smiled sweetly and waved. "Evening, Evan," she called. "Just catching up with the neighbors about your art piece." "Glad you're a fan," I said. "Oh, we're all very interested. Especially the board." The neighbors laughed, not a genuine laugh, but the kind people give when they're scared of offending the alpha. That was Karen's gift, she didn't need to raise her voice. She poisoned you with politeness. The next morning, I woke up to find the sprinklers going off in broad daylight. Only I hadn't activated them. When I checked the system logs, I found a breach. Someone had tampered with the control box behind the hedges. The wires were ripped out, sensors smashed. And I knew exactly who it was. That evening, I went to the HOA office, a converted garage behind Karen's house, with a flagpole and a plastic Brookvale Estates where neighbors thrive sign out front. Karen was inside, sorting through papers like she was running the Pentagon. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Someone damaged my sprinkler system." "Oh," she said, not looking up. "Perhaps it malfunctioned. Cheap equipment tends to do that." "It was vandalized," I said sharply. "You know anything about that?" She finally looked up, folding her hands on the desk with that patronizing calm. "Evan, I think the problem here is attitude. You've been combative. The board feels your installation sends the wrong message. We're a community, not a fortress. Then maybe the community should stop invading my yard." Her smile twitched. "You're welcome to file a complaint, but given your current standing, I wouldn't recommend antagonizing the board further." "Are you threatening me?" "Of course not." She stood, smoothing her cardigan. "Just neighborly advice." I turned to leave, but she added quietly, "Oh, and Evan? I noticed your trash bins were left out past collection time last week." "That's another violation." That was the moment I decided, no more passive defense. It was time for phase 2. I spent that night in my garage, the glow of my laptop bouncing off power tools and spare wiring. Karen wanted a war? I'd give her one that would make the HOA handbook weep. By dawn, I'd built something new. It looked innocent enough, just a small, discreet black box mounted under my front porch light. But it wasn't decorative. It was a motion-activated sound emitter, the kind used to keep raccoons and deer away. High frequency. Inaudible to most humans, but if you tuned it just right, it made certain pitches unbearable for anyone nearby. I installed it, linked it to the same sensors that triggered the sprinklers, and set the range to 25 feet. The next morning, Karen came marching up my driveway, clipboard in hand, ready to inspect. Beep. The sprinklers hissed to life, but this time, no water. Just a faint hum. Karen froze mid-step, frowning. Then it hit her. She winced, pressing her hands to her ears. What is that? I smiled from the porch. Just my new pest deterrent. She staggered back, flustered. You can't, this is harassment. Stay off my lawn, Karen. She retreated down the driveway, yelling over her shoulder. The board will not tolerate this. By the time she reached the sidewalk, 3 neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was. Karen, red-faced and fuming, pointed at me like she was calling the cops on a teenager with fireworks. He's turned his property into a war zone. Tom from next door chuckled. Looks like it's working, though. Karen glared at him, then stormed off toward her house. For the rest of the week, she didn't step a single foot near my property. But she wasn't done. Wednesday night, I caught the glint of headlights outside my window. Someone was parked across the street, lights off. Watching. When I stepped outside, the car peeled away, but not before I caught the license plate. Karen's silver Lexus. The next morning, my mailbox was gone. Just gone. Ripped out of the ground like it had never existed. That was her message. I replaced it within hours, but this time, I reinforced it with a concrete anchor and steel bolts. If she wanted to keep escalating, I'd be ready. 2 days later, I got a certified letter. HOA Board Hearing Notice. You are hereby required to appear before the Brookvale Homeowners Association Board on Saturday at 10 a.m. to address multiple violations and disruptive behavior. I knew exactly what that meant. Karen wanted to humiliate me in front of the neighborhood. But what she didn't know was that my final surprise was already in place, one she'd never see coming. Saturday morning arrived bright and calm, the air thick with artificial suburban peace. Lawn mowers hummed in the distance, kids biked past, and birds chirped like nothing could go wrong in paradise. Karen was already set up outside the HOA office, a little folding table with a gavel and name placard, Karen Lutz, President. Her board members sat beside her like obedient jurors. Mr. Mitchell, she said as I approached. Please take a seat. Pleasure as always, I said, setting my phone discreetly on the table. She launched into her monologue of violations, misconduct, disrespect, non-compliance. It went on and on, each word dripping with self-importance. Then, just as she raised her gavel to declare me in breach of community standards, the sprinklers across my lawn activated. Only this time, they didn't spray water. They sprayed harmless washable paint, bright neon pink, the kind used in fun runs and color festivals. The air filled with mist as the water vapor carried streaks of pink across the breeze, right toward the HOA table. Karen screamed as a wave of pink mist coated her blouse, her gavel, and her perfect hairdo. The board scrambled, coughing, slipping on the wet grass. The neighbors poured out of their houses, laughing, snapping photos. I just stood there, arms crossed. Guess my sprinklers are malfunctioning again, I said. Better call maintenance. Karen's jaw trembled, her face a shade darker than the paint. This is war, she hissed. No, I said, smiling. This is art. And as the laughter rolled across the neighborhood, Karen stormed off, pink, furious, and utterly defeated, for now. Because I knew she'd come back. And I was already planning phase 3. By Monday morning, Brookvale Estates looked like a battlefield of passive aggression. Pink-tinted grass still stained the curbs, neighbors whispered in driveways, and someone had even spray-painted Sprinkler Man 1, HOA 0 on the sidewalk in front of my house. It wasn't me, but I wasn't about to correct the record. Karen, however, was silent. Too silent. And that's how I knew something big was coming. The calm lasted 4 days. On the 5th, I came home from work to find a bright orange official notice nailed to my door, not taped, nailed, like an eviction decree from some medieval landlord. Notice of foreclosure action, immediate removal required. The Brookvale Estates HOA has voted unanimously to pursue lien and foreclosure on Lot 24, E. Mitchell, due to egregious violation of community bylaws, hostile conduct, and damage to HOA property. I stood there, reading it over twice, my pulse pounding. Foreclosure? For sprinklers and pink mist? That was when Tom from next door stepped over, holding a beer and an expression halfway between sympathy and amusement. Man, he said, she really went nuclear. She can't legally do this, I said. She doesn't have the power. Tom took a sip. Technically, the board has to vote, but everyone knows Karen is the board. I looked back at my house, my sanctuary, my last slice of peace. And I realized that Karen wasn't satisfied with winning an argument. She wanted obedience. That night, I didn't sleep. I dug through HOA bylaws, county records, and homeowner statutes until the lines blurred. By dawn, I'd found what I needed, the one clause Karen never expected anyone to read. The next evening, Brookvale held its monthly HOA meeting. It was supposed to be routine, but this time, the crowd was triple the usual. Word had spread about the sprinkler war, and everyone wanted a front row seat. Karen sat at her usual table, gavel in hand, wearing a new cream suit that practically screamed authority. Her smugness had returned. Order, she said, tapping the gavel. Tonight's primary agenda, the disciplinary review and foreclosure authorization for Lot 24, owned by Mr. Evan Mitchell. A murmur ran through the crowd. I stood up. Calm. Composed. Before you begin your little kangaroo court, Karen, I'd like to present something. She sighed theatrically. Mr. Mitchell, this is not a discussion. You've consistently defied. Actually, I said, holding up a folder, according to Brookvale HOA Bylaw 6, Section D, any foreclosure action must be approved by a 2/3 vote of the entire neighborhood, not just the board. The crowd buzzed. Karen froze. That clause is outdated, she said, her voice sharpening. It's still in the official documentation filed with the county clerk, I replied, pulling out a printed copy. And guess what, Karen? I filed a public records request this morning, it's valid. Her smile faltered. You. So, I continued, unless you've convinced 47 homeowners to vote for my eviction, this meeting is just another performance. From the back, someone called, he's right. We didn't vote on anything. Another neighbor, Marlene Cook, of all people, chimed in. Karen, did you even ask the community? Karen's composure cracked. The board acts in the community's best interests. Then maybe the community should pick a new board, I said. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's cheeks went red. You're undermining everything this neighborhood stands for. I stepped closer. No, Karen. I'm reminding people it's their neighborhood, not your personal kingdom. She slammed the gavel. This meeting is adjourned. But the crowd didn't disperse. People began muttering, angry, energized. Someone shouted, let's vote him staying, and cheers followed. Karen's face hardened. She turned and stormed off, the gavel clattering onto the table behind her. That was the night the HOA's power cracked. Over the next week, things shifted fast. Neighbors who'd been silent started questioning everything. Why were HOA fees so high? Why were Karen's friends always exempt from fines? Turns out, when you dig through ledgers, patterns appear. And I was very good at patterns. By Friday, I'd collected enough evidence of financial inconsistencies to make the county auditor salivate, including HOA funds being used for executive lunches and personal landscaping. I didn't have to expose it publicly. I just had to hint that I could. I sent Karen an email with scanned excerpts and a polite subject line. Subject, clarification on HOA accounting discrepancies. Body, thought you might want to review these before the next board meeting. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea. No threats. Just implication. The next morning, she resigned. Personal reasons. Life in Brookvale changed after that. The new acting HOA president, a retired teacher named Sandra Collins, promised transparency and neighborly cooperation. The bylaws were reviewed, the lawn service replaced, and for the first time in months, people actually smiled when they waved. As for Karen, she tried to keep her pride. I'd see her occasionally, walking her dog past my house, wearing sunglasses big enough to hide behind. She never looked my way. Until one afternoon, about a month later. I was tending my garden, same spot where the war began, when I heard her voice behind me. Evan. I turned. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk, holding the leash loosely, her tone quieter than I'd ever heard it. You got what you wanted, she said. I hope you're satisfied. I shrugged. I just wanted peace. She scoffed softly. You could have asked nicely. I did, I said. 3 times. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. There was no anger left in her, just exhaustion, the kind you get when the empire you built out of control finally collapses under its own weight. She turned to leave. Enjoy your lawn, she muttered. I will, I said. As she walked away, her dog paused and looked back at me. I smiled. The dog wagged its tail. Then, just for the fun of it, the motion sensor on the sprinkler clicked. Beep. PSSSHHHH. A thin arc of water sprayed harmlessly across the sidewalk, just missing Karen's pristine white sneakers. She yelped, glaring back, soaked halfway to the ankle. I raised my coffee mug in salute. Old habits die hard, I said. She didn't reply, just shook her head, muttering as she walked off. But for the first time since I'd moved into Brookvale Estates, I felt something I hadn't in months. Silence. Freedom. And a front lawn that was mine. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the sprinkler mist catch the sunset, I thought about everything that had happened, the war, the revenge, the chaos. And I realized something simple. In a world full of Karens, sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's winning your peace back. I took a sip of coffee, listening to the faint whir of the sprinklers, and smiled. Because this time, the only thing crossing my lawn was the wind.